Scots stay with the UK. We have reaction to the failed referendum for Scottish independence. French strikes. Fighter jets from France hit Islamic State terrorist targets. Riveting testimony. We hear from one of the Nigerian schoolgirls kidnapped by Boko Haram. And quick trip. We preview the Pope's one-day visit to Albania this weekend. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, September 19th, 2014. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. The British Prime Minister promises Scotland more autonomy following a failed independence referendum. The majority of voters chose to stay with the United Kingdom, but UK leaders say that doesn't mean a return to the status quo. Wyatt Goolsby reports from the British Embassy here in Washington tonight. Wyatt?
Brian, the leaders of Britain's three largest political parties all agree that after yesterday's referendum, Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland should all be given a greater sense of independence and autonomy from the central UK government, a promise that could change the country forever.
We now have a chance, a great opportunity, to change the way the British people are governed and change it for the better.
A sigh of relief today from British Prime Minister David Cameron. In a turnout of more than 3.5 million, the Scottish people voted 55% against independence, 45% for.
I accept that verdict of the people, and I call on all of Scotland to follow suit in accepting the democratic verdict of the people of Scotland.
One immediate change, Alex Salmond, Scotland's pro-independence leader, announced he will resign as First Minister and leader of his political party. He said that for Scots, the dream of independence will never die. But that dream isn't limited to Scotland. Headlines on the referendum led the news in Spain, where citizens living in Catalonia are split over whether they want to break from the central government in Madrid.
I would have liked a yes vote victory like many people over here. As a Catalan and nationalist, I would like Catalonia to become independent.
I think this result proves people want to stay together and stay united, as in some places here in Spain, such as Catalonia. And I think it will affect a lot the future of Europe.
Unlike in Scotland, Catalonia cannot call for a regional referendum on the same issue. Still, the Scottish vote has energized Catalans and captured the world's attention.
Catholic bishops in Scotland say they recognize and respect the results from the referendum. Those bishops have stayed neutral on the issue itself, but right now they're saying and urging Scots to come together and put aside whatever political differences could have come about as a result of the referendum and cooperate with one another in the years to come. Brian?
All right, Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the British Embassy here in Washington tonight. David Speedie is a former professor at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. He's now with the Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs, joining us by satellite from New York. David, there was quite a momentum for this independence vote in Scotland, and yet it didn't turn out that way. What happened?
Well, let's keep it in perspective, Brian. I mean, just a few months ago, the yes vote was polling at about in the low 30s. Yesterday, it was 45%. I think what happened was, basically the full weight of the UK establishment when the vote was getting closer being thrown behind the no campaign. You had the three major parties in Westminster, the media, the business community, the governor of the Bank of England, a whole slew of international figures, including some from the US. It was a full court press, and yet 45% came out for yes.
So this referendum really caused a political shakeup. What kind of climate is the new First Minister of Scotland stepping into?
Well, first of all, it's a very divided country at this point. There was a lot of emotion on both sides. The new leader, if it's she, Nicola Sturgeon's clearly the deputy and the front runner, she or he will have two big things, I think. First, to negotiate exactly what the new powers of devolution will be. Cameron promised a new Scottish manifesto, as it were, in 6 months' time, 2015 March. But second of all, I think she has to consolidate the SNP within Scotland. In that regard, it's notable that a place like Glasgow, which has been solid Labour forever, voted for yes yesterday. So that was a momentum swing to SNP. So I think both within Scotland and in terms of negotiating the deal with Westminster, she's going to have a full plate.
Was this a one-shot deal, or will we see another attempt at this?
That's a very good question. Salmon said, obviously, that he would not, there would not be another referendum. I think in view of today's announcement that he's stepping down, obviously it means he will not be involved in a second referendum. But bear this in mind. Of the younger generation in Scotland, there was a sort of mirror image here. The older generation, 60 and up, voted 60% against independence. The younger generation, with a massive social media campaign by the Yes campaign, voted almost similarly in favour. So you're really looking at the next generation of Scotland, and especially if the UK votes within a couple of years to leave Europe. Scotland is the most pro-UK Europe part of the UK. So I think these two, the generational question and the Europe question, it means that another referendum is absolutely not out of the question.
It is far from settled. All right, David Speedie with the Carnegie Council joining us from New York. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Brian.
Now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell is now breaking his silence on the increasing criticism that faces the league.
I got it wrong in the handling of the Ray Rice matter, and I'm sorry for that. But now I will get it right and do whatever is necessary to accomplish that.
Goodell says the league will implement new conduct policies with clear and transparent rules. He hopes to have these ready by the end of the season. The NFL has been heavily criticized for lenient or delayed punishment of Ray Rice, Adrian Peterson, and other players involved in recent domestic violence cases. Less than 3 weeks into this football season, 5 such cases have made headlines. In response, the NFL will partner with a domestic violence hotline and a sexual violence resource center. Well, as French fighter jets attack Islamic State targets, legislation to arm and train moderate Syrian rebels to fight the terror group is now waiting for President Obama's signature. Iraq's military says 4 French airstrikes killed dozens of fighters from the Islamic State. Legislation to arm Syrian rebels was approved by Congress this week before another recess. National Security Advisor Susan Rice reiterated the administration's strategy today.
To be clear, as we've said repeatedly, our strategy does not involve U.S. troops on the ground in a combat role in either Iraq or Syria. And no U.S. troops will be in Syria as part of the Train and Equip program.
Joint Chiefs Chairman Martin Dempsey says it could take up to a year before moderate Syrian rebels trained by U.S. troops are actually ready to fight. Pope Francis focused on Christians and other religious minorities during his visit with Armenia's president today. The Holy Father received the head of the state as a custom in his library, or as is custom. They discussed the special role of Christianity in Armenian history. They also expressed hope for dialogue to resolve issues in the Middle East. Armenia is in southwestern Asia between Turkey and Azerbaijan. It's home to an ancient Christian community. At least 1 million Armenians were killed by the Turks in the early 20th century. Armenians fled their land as the result of that genocide. Parts of Manila and nearby provinces are flooded because of heavy rains from a storm and the seasonal monsoon. Schools and government offices are closed in the Filipino capital. Thousands have been evacuated from severely inundated communities. Some areas are under rapidly flowing water more than neck high. One forecaster says more than 10 inches of rain fell over parts of Metro Manila. Sierra Leone starts a 3-day nationwide lockdown today in its effort to halt the deadly Ebola outbreak. No one's allowed to leave their homes for 3 days as volunteers go door to door educating people on the virus. Authorities hope to find and isolate Ebola patients who've resisted going to health centers. Muslims are being told to pray at home today, while Christians do the same on Sunday. Authorities say a man who killed his daughter and 6 of his grandchildren is an ex-convict. Don Spirit called 911 last night, warning that he might hurt himself. When police arrived at his home outside Gainesville, Florida, Spirit had killed 7 family members and himself. He had spent time in prison for accidentally shooting his son to death on a hunting trip. Investigators say they do not know his motive. And in a separate search that's underway, they're trying to find a man accused of a deadly ambush on 2 Pennsylvania state troopers a week ago.
Eric Matthew Frame has been added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitive list. in addition to providing an additional reward up to $100,000 for information leading to his arrest.
Today marks the 7th day of the manhunt for Frayne. Police described the 31-year-old suspect as an anti-law survivalist who is armed and extremely dangerous. He is charged with killing Corporal Byron Dixon and wounding Trooper Alex Douglas in a late-night ambush last week. Dixon's funeral was held yesterday in Scranton's St. Peter's Cathedral. Well, the Chinese giant internet retailer Alibaba is now public and trading on the New York Stock Exchange. Alibaba is already a powerhouse in China. Its site is often described as China's Amazon, eBay, and PayPal all rolled into one. Alibaba's stock is priced at $68 per share, making it the largest IPO in the U.S. U.S. internet giant Yahoo owns more than a 22% stake in that site. Long lines are just another price Apple fans seem to be willing to pay. The new iPhone 6 and 6 Plus were released today. Some people even camped out overnight to be one of the first to own the new smartphone. A record 4 million of the new iPhones sold on its first day. Coming up, one of the girls kidnapped by Boko Haram terrorists speaks out for the first time in the U.S. And a park for seniors? Some Texans in their golden years are staying fit on their own playground. On Friday, September 19th, this is EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick, and many of the nearly 300 Nigerian schoolgirls kidnapped by Boko Haram terrorists in April are still missing. But tonight we meet one who escaped. Jason Calvi joins us with her inspiring story.
Yes, Brian, it's the first time one of the girls has spoken in public here in the United States. She speaks of a 24-hour journey from school to kidnapping to escape.
Wearing a veil to protect her privacy, she asked that we call her Sa'a. The day Boko Haram terrorists kidnapped her and her classmates will forever be etched on her mind.
They asked us to gather ourselves together, not to run away, not to shout. If we shout or we run away, they were going to kill us.
The girls were forced onto trucks.
I decided to jump down from the trucks. I'd rather die that my parents have my cuff and buried than to go with them because we don't know where we are going.
These are the last images we saw of Sa'a's classmates. The terrorists released the video in May. It shows the girls wearing traditional Muslim clothing. Human rights lawyer Emmanuel Ogabe just returned from a fact-finding mission in northern Nigeria. He says some of the girls may have been used to carry out attacks.
An 80% certainty that one schoolgirl who was abducted from the school in Chibok was blown up.
Boko Haram has been ramping up violence since 2010, bombing this UN building and attacking 6 churches and 2 mosques last year alone. The Global Terrorism Database says Boko Haram has killed more than 3,600 people.
There is just no tolerance by Boko Haram for anyone who is not a Muslim. And even the Muslims themselves are being targeted if they don't abide by their dictates.
But Boko Haram couldn't get 18-year-old Sa'a.
When we come home, I met my parents crying. My all relatives are crying because what's happened.
And that young Christian woman is now studying here in the United States. But the reign of terror continues in Nigeria. Ogabe says Boko Haram has overrun 6 cities and even beheaded Christians, all in the past few weeks. Brian?
Thank you, Jason. Dr. Katrina Lantos Swett is the chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. We're so grateful that you take some time to be with us. We just heard from Emmanuel Ogabe, and yesterday at the hearing, he criticized your commission, saying that you misjudge Boko Haram. He said it should be called a foreign terrorist organization. Your response?
Well, we are not authorized by our statute to make recommendations about what groups should or shouldn't be designated as foreign terrorist organizations, but we at USCIRF were the first really to identify Boko Haram and bring it to the attention of our government as a cause and a source of potential great danger for the people of Nigeria. So we were really on top of that, although it's not our role specifically to address the issue of who gets designated as a foreign terrorist organization.
Let's turn to the International Religious Freedom Act. It proposes sanctions and other consequences for countries that don't have a good record. Is the Obama administration enforcing these?
I would say that neither the current administration nor the preceding administration really has robustly used the tools that this legislation gives to them to sanction abusive governments. Where possible, one wants to work cooperatively with the government to look for a path out of the pattern of bad behavior that they're on. But we, as a commission, have encouraged, not the current administration, President Obama's administration, but President Bush's administration as well, to be more aggressive and really utilize the tools that are there at their disposal.
Give us a snapshot of how religious freedom and foreign policy interact with one another.
Well, I think that at the present moment that we're in, it's almost self-evident. The world is in flames with religious freedom atrocities of a shocking, shocking sort. What's happening in the Middle East with ISIS has riveted the whole world, but that is really just the tip of the iceberg. So one of the things we try to persuade policymakers to see clearly is that unless we get the religious freedom component of our foreign policy right, we will not be able to solve our most intractable foreign policy and national security challenges, because many of them have their roots in religious conflict, in religious division, in religious sectarianism. And so we have to help other countries build that robust public space where people of varying beliefs and people of no belief can exist with respect and with mutual peace and tolerance.
In a nutshell, what is the role of USCIRF?
Well, we're an independent, bipartisan commission established by Congress with the mission really of monitoring on the state of religious freedom globally, making reports, and then making recommendations, policy recommendations to the President, to the Congress, and to the Secretary of State. And we also like to think of ourselves as a megaphone and advocates on behalf of the persecuted in every corner of the world.
Well, you certainly opened our eyes this evening. We appreciate you. Dr. Katrina Lantos Swett, Chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And bishops from the Ivory Coast are in Rome. They met with Pope Francis yesterday. The Vatican reports the Holy Father told the African bishops to treat the priests in their dioceses like brothers. He said, visit them often and get to know their concerns. Pope Francis also encouraged them to bridge ethnic divisions with Muslims and offered advice on how to present church teaching to non-Christian cultures. Also yesterday, the Pope met with newly appointed bishops from around the world. He warned them not to be superficially happy, but to dig deeper spiritually. And he begged them not to try to change people, but to, quote, love the people God has given you, even if they've committed grave sins. Well, as more Americans grow older, we're seeing new ways to care for this aging population. Catherine Elliott reports on a park designed for senior citizens.
84-year-old Zadie Jones loves her visits to the playground.
In fact, I like all of it, but this is my favorite.
This is called a balance and hip twist and is one of several exercise activities at Carbide Park in Lamarck, Texas.
Kind of makes you invigorating. You just feel like you can do anything.
At a playground that isn't geared to the kids.
We're looking to replace a playground. We had the money budgeted for a playground replacement. This was a great idea. It fit well with what we already do here in the park with our senior program. It just happened to be the right fit at the right time.
Called a motion wellness system, this special equipment cost Galveston County $36,000 and includes 15 exercise stations to help seniors maintain their coordination and balance.
That's very important because, when you start looking at the causes of accidents and what happens to seniors, most of the time it's for falling, it's motor control, it's the motor skills, they're losing those motor skills, and this will help them, hand-eye coordination, things of that nature. This will definitely help to improve that and to continue it and to maintain it.
Officials estimate that more than 100 senior citizens have utilized the equipment since it opened to the public in mid-August. And County Commissioner Stephen Holmes believes senior playgrounds won't stay a novelty for long.
Because I do believe that this is going to be an idea that catches on throughout the rest of the state and rest of the country. These are going to be things that are going to be popping up everywhere.
To help others actively enjoy their golden years. Catherine Elliott, EWTN News Nightly.
Yay! Up next, it may seem odd, but these 700-year-old skeletons tell a love story for the ages. And we hear from the organizer of Pope Francis's trip to Albania this Sunday. Thanks Thanks for joining us on this Friday evening. And Pope Francis makes a quick but important trip to Blessed Mother Teresa's native land of Albania Sunday. Earlier this week, we talked with the man who organized the papal visit. We're joined on Skype by Albert Nicola from Albania. He's the National Director of Caritas Albania and coordinating the papal visit to Albania September 21st. Tell us a little bit about the excitement there in Albania about this papal visit.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I have to say that, generally speaking, all Albanians are waiting with a great sense of gratitude the Pope's visit. Basically, the Albanian society look at the Pope, at his image, as a kind of hope, as a kind of person that is really bringing to us support in our difficult road to the European Union. For this reason, I'm really sure that the Albanian society is very happy of this visit. And everybody could understand it by reading newspaper, by looking at TV, in the social media. So people are really excited to wait Pope Francis. Pope Francis is so lovable to Albanians.
Of course, just a little over 20 years ago, John Paul II visited Albania. Things have changed a great deal in your country since then, haven't they?
Well, when Pope John Paul II visited Albania, communism just collapsed it. And in that moment, the Albanian society was really shocked by the communist regime. And in that moment, we really were in a dramatic moment of our recent history, and we needed hope. And I remember that moment. I was 20 years old in that time, and I remember that Pope kissed our land at the moment that the airplane landed, and really it was just to say to us, Albanians, you are not alone. Pope is here with you. And that's what we needed. And the Catholic Church in that moment really wanted to have a great support, because the Catholic community during the communist regime has suffered a lot.
And this Pope really emphasizes unity between the various world religions. You have the majority Muslim religion there, the Orthodox, and of course the Catholic faith there. So the choice of Albania is significant for the Holy Father, is it not?
Yes, it's significant because I think that the Holy Father is really involved in the question of dialogue since he was the Bishop of Buenos Aires. And for this reason, I think he appreciated a lot the fact that in Albania there is an interreligious dialogue, there is an interreligious coexistence, but this has been a kind of good tradition in Albania since years. So I think that this is a great moment, and in fact, in the program of the Pope's visit, is the program, the meeting with the representatives of different religious communities in Albania.
And of course, EWTN will have full coverage of the Pope's trip to Albania on Sunday. Here in the nation's capital for weeks to come, songs of praise will be heard in the shadow of the White House. Our Mark Irons takes us there.
Just outside what some consider the most powerful house in the world, there's a tent. Those inside say it houses a power of its own.
As a nation, we want to come together to give him glory, honor, and praise.
David's tent kicked off this week in D.C. The annual event consists of 50 days of Christian praise and worship. This is its third year. Bands from all over the country participate, and the songs don't stop when the sun goes down. Founder Jason Hershey says the 24/7 event is inspired by King David in the Bible. In the book of Chronicles, David sets up a tent outside his palace in Jerusalem to house the Ark of the Covenant. Hershey was ecstatic when the National Park Service allowed the group to hold the event outside the White House.
That was just like a miracle moment from the Lord, just saying you need to do it here, right outside the palace, just like David did it. We want to make Jesus central in the United States.
I was just gripped with the idea, like, no, like Jesus Christ is worthy of 24/7, and like, and what better place to do it than like our capital city.
The praise will go on in the capital for 46 more days, day and night. Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Mark. And finally tonight, they say true love endures. An incredible example of that. Archaeologists in England have uncovered a pair of skeletons that have been holding hands for the last 700 years. They're among 11 skeletons found in the small village. That's the same site where archaeologists found the remains of King Richard III. They were placed there together in that position. They certainly had plenty of room to have been buried apart. So enduring love, lasting love is the wish for the 20 couples married at St. Peter's Basilica on Sunday. So as we wrap up tonight, let's look back at the beautiful sacrament presided over by Pope Francis. Until Monday, good night and God bless you.